Dear students, good morning. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 19th February 2018. The first article, for India it should be neighborhood first. The question we are going to ask here is, can India be a global leader without settling its relations in the neighborhood? So in this context, India recently has called for ASEAN leaders as guests in its Republic Day parade. And second thing is, Prime Minister Modi has made visits to West Asia. He visited Israel, and Israel Prime Minister also visited India again. And then recently Prime Minister visited to Palestine. So this is a de-hyphenation India is trying to do. So during his visit to Palestine, Prime Minister aspired for an independent and sovereign Palestine. He did not state it as united and viable Palestine, which was India's regular wording before. So Prime Minister has tried to avoid details and specifics during his visit. And when ASEAN leaders have asked for a proactive role for India in the region, India did not get into specifics or remained non-committal. So can this approach or attitude it can be followed in South Asia? So in these circumstances, let's understand the recent events in South Asia. If you take Pakistan, Indian policy collapsed on matters related to Pakistan. So virtually there was no dialogue going on the formal channels. So the ceasefire violations are a daily routine, and it is hurting India the most. And second, if you go to Bangladesh, the relations appear to be normal. But however, today, Ms. Khalida Zia, the opposition leader, was convicted on corruption charges, and it has created a vacuum in the opposition space. So who are going to occupy this opposition space is a major concern for India. And third thing is Nepal. Oli government, last time when it was in power, India-Nepal relations are at its lowest point. The reason Nepal states is India has economically unleashed a blockade, and it has caused severe hardships, and it is one of the reasons for Oli to lose his prime ministership before. So now, the Nepal government headed by Prime Minister Oli is not very favorable to India. And Maldives, the recent declaration of emergency and killing of democratic institutions, closure of Supreme Court and Majlis. So these are not very much to the interests of India. And Maldives under Amin era, it has moved very close to China. And China wants to have strong interest in the Indian Ocean. So if you take Djibouti on the Horn of Africa, Gwadar in Pakistan, and then deepening interest in Maldives, all these show that the China is interested to have a strong access and presence in Indian Ocean. So the instability in Maldives is going to worst affect the India's interests. You also have noticed how swiftly Maldives have made a free trade agreement with China, and to what extent India's interests are getting damaged there. So recently the GMR, it was having a contract to build the Malé airport. So unilaterally Maldives government has given away to the Chinese firm. So it clearly shows that the politics in Maldives are not very favorable to India. Afghanistan, the state collapse appears to be imminent now. So the regional or provincial leadership, they are declaring their independence and are not showing any concern or connection with the union government there. And they are nurturing their own finances. And the terrorism is at its worst in Afghanistan now. So the collapse of the state in Afghanistan can take the Afghanistan back to the era of this terrorism and Talibanism. So this is what the concern for India. So India has to address multifarious problems that are existing in its neighborhood before it claims its leadership at the global level. That is what the author talks about. Doctors for rural India. If you see the concerns in rural India, lack of manpower is the major concern. So, always we try to find certain one or the other solution for this. So, what we stated is let's have the barefoot doctors. So, these are the people who are minimally trained in medicine who can identify the symptoms and can appropriately refer the patients. So, this barefoot doctor system is existing in China. And second is compulsory rural medical practice for the MBBS doctors. It was opposed by entire medical fraternity. And the third thing is posting the Ayush doctors at the PHCs. So all of these efforts have failed. Then what is the way forward? Before 1940s, we had a separate team of doctors who are minimally trained in the basic medicine and who are able to solve the problems of rural health. So these are called licentiate medical practitioners. So why can't we revive this? That is what is the question he poses. So Boer committee has given way for more MBBS doctors in rural India rather than LMPs, stating that the quality of healthcare has to be uniform throughout the country. But the deficiency of MBBS doctors is worsening the existing situation. So, the author suggests is this. At the sub-center level, we can appoint the LMPs, and the primary healthcare centers, we can extend the scope and the MBBS doctors can be identified and appointed over there. So, if you take United States of America too, there is a specialized medicine there called osteopathic medicine. So, that kind of medical practices can also be brought into India. So, the shortage of the doctors in rural areas can be addressed through LMPs. That is what? The essential thing. The major criticism against it will be this. Are the substandard services are being offered to rural people? Or rural people are being treated as second-class citizens? So, these are the questions which will come over here. Next is directing reforms. So, this is about recent Supreme Court judgment. Now, previously, while nomination papers are filed, three things need to be declared. One are criminal antecedents. The second is assets of the individual. Third is educational qualifications. Because the vote is a form of expression, a form of choice expressed by an individual. So it is a kind of a right. So in this context, having complete information about contesting candidate is essential. That's what Supreme Court stated. Informed citizenry is the strength of democracy. Now, an extension of this, the Supreme Court clearly states that in the case of assets, the sources of income also has to be stated. So, the second thing, a permanent mechanism has to be created to investigate the jump in assets when one was a representative. It means an MP, if he has got a sudden jump in his assets during his tenure, that can be investigated by this independent officer. So these are the two recommendations. These are going to pave a long-term reform in elections. If you take Election Commission of India, the biggest failure of it is its inability to curb the black money. And then Section 123 of the Representation of People's Act also declares it as a disqualification if an individual fails to declare assets or sources of income. So this is judicially motivated, mediated electoral reform that is becoming popular in India. So it is centered on two themes. One is the voter shall be made aware of his candidates, and the second is the money factor has to be reduced in the elections in India. Next is alliance divided. It is about Sri Lanka. Already we had enough discussion on Sri Lanka. Remember, there is National Unity Government of Sri Lankan Freedom Party, United National Party. The Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe belongs to UNP. President Sirisena belongs to Sri Lankan Freedom Party. So in the local elections, they contested separately and both of them have lost the elections. A newly emerged party, that is Sri Lankan People's Party, so which is supported by the former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, has won the elections. So in this context, the rift has developed between the two. So if you take the legitimacy of the national unity government lies on its promises, that is, promise for good governance, development, reconciliation and civil war torn Sri Lanka. So reconciliation between Sinhala and the Tamil population. So this has to be upheld rather than the narrow political interests. The focus of the government has to be on the constitutional reform and power sharing in this country. That is, essence of this article is the voice of Pakistan's voiceless. So this is about the human rights activist Asma Jahangir. So just remember the personality. So our major area of action is related to human rights and protection of rule of law. More than that is not required for us. Now, breaking the Chinese whispers. It is about Shiv Shankar Mean's statement over here. The rise of China is a reality. India has to cope up this reality and its work its strategy against this backdrop. And second is, the Chinese border is the peaceful border for India. So any rise in tensions is going to take away much of resources away from it. So India and China has to work out that the border dispute will not derail their cooperation in the other areas. That's what the people have stated over here. Keep the economy humming. So in this, there are two things which are major concerns. One is the state of health of Indian banks, and then there is private investments. So private investments are decreasing and it is going to hurt the Indian economy the worst. I have already told to you that is private investment, public investment, and then exports, and finally the consumption-led demand. All these are going to push the economic growth. So as of now, it is running only on one engine, that is public investments. So we need to move to the other engine, that is private investments. This is what is been spoken over here. And the first paper, the Tripura elections. So let us see the 79% of the vote, the increased voter turnover, it is going to provide good chances for BJP. That's what is stated over here. No scam in Rafale deal, says Nirmala Sitharaman. Try to know these Rafale aircrafts which are being bought from France. And then the Canadian Prime Minister is on a visit to India. So here the issue is many of his cabinet colleagues are Sikhs, including his defense minister. These are explicit supporters of the Khalistan movement, which is a matter of inconvenience for India. So in this context, how India-Canada relations can be redefined is a major question. In the last page, I gave you the notes that is available at laix.in/CivilsPrep. Thank you very much and all the best.